Welcome back to another episode of Bird's Eye View. Today we have with us a friend and colleague of mine, Dan Connor. Thanks so much for being with us today.
I'm
Alex C. with Bird Law Group. Just introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about the kind of law you practice or what you do.
Sure. I'm Dan Connor. I'm at Connor Injury Law. I started my firm a little over a year ago. I do medical malpractice with a focus on birth injury and infant and maternal death.
And I know this because we've had a chance to work together, but whenever we get a birth injury case in at Bird Law Group, Dan's almost always our first call. So those cases are extremely difficult. How is it that you got into that very specific area of medical malpractice?
So I started off in big law, and when I came over, I wanted to move more into trial type work. So I did a little defense work, and then when I started working as on the plaintiff side, which I was trying to get into for quite a while, when I did finally make the jump, I worked firm doing exclusively birth injury cases. And so that's where I did 5 years of just doing birth injury. And that's where I got interested in it. But as far as what keeps me interested in it, it's just, I really think these families are the easiest to represent. They're inspiring. What they've been through is terrible. The juxtaposition between expecting the best thing in your life with, the worst thing in your life is just so tragic. And so you just feel like you're on the right side from the beginning and at least wanting to help, even if you aren't able to or there's no case there.
Right. No, I mean, I feel that way when those cases come in, and especially the ones we're working on now.
Yeah, definitely.
And in my current situation, being very close to those cases. So in the news lately, and especially with the tort reform push, there's been a lot of discussion about how we have sort of, I guess, medical deserts, right? Or a lack of OBGYN care that's accessible to folks in certain areas in the state. Have you seen that play out in your cases, or do you think that's having an impact on the volume of cases that you're getting in?
So it's actually interesting, though, because it is across the board. But definitely, if you have a situation where you have a family and they live in an area where it is hard to get access to that kind of care, I have seen situations where maybe there's less staff or that kind of thing that does affect the care.
Right.
Definitely. And then on the flip side, I've been surprised at situations that I've had where, people are in a hospital, or you would expect that would not be the case. And yet, the care is not what it needs to be.
Right. So you see both, is what I'm hearing you say, that you see folks who are at hospitals like Northside or Piedmont in Atlanta that are fully equipped and the right thing doesn't happen. But then also maybe some folks who are having issues accessing care, and you see negligence there too.
Yeah. And I think especially as, and I know this is no secret, but as these larger corporations buy up these hospitals, I've talked to people who feel like the hospital changes, the character of the hospital changes because it becomes a little less personal, I guess, and that kind of thing, which I think is happening with medicine nationwide.
Right. More corporate, less access to MDs, right?
Right.
I think everybody wants to blame that on us, on plaintiffs' lawyers.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but
I know we could probably talk about that the whole time.
We're right in the midst of the tort reform thing, as you know. And I do think the way that's framed, I was going to use this as my For the Birds lighthearted thing, but I think the way that's framed to people is that, there are these nuclear verdicts and all of these things are happening as plaintiffs' lawyers are driving this. When in reality, I think we all know that usually when those kinds of things happen, it's because insurance companies haven't come to the table and done the right thing, and that's my opinion. But I think that's what often happens that drives these things. And I don't think that's talked about as much, I
don't think it is either. I've heard other lawyers frame it as the lies that jurors are told, like in trial, right? Or maybe it's just the truths they aren't given, that there is insurance behind almost every single one of the cases we bring.
Right.
And that the reason we're in court is not because the plaintiff has stomped their feet and said, I'm going to court. I want to parade this in front of a jury and wait 5 years to get there. But because the folks who hold access to the funds to settle just don't do it.
Yeah. And especially the people that we're talking about with birth injury specifically. I think if you have a brain injured child who needs help for the rest of their life, you're not playing games. You would just want to get your child help. And so,
right. Right. I mean, because the whole time, well, let me ask you this. On average, how long does it usually take from inception to get to trial in a case like this?
So it varies. Like it could be, well, it's years,
right?
At least. And so a case recently resolved that I was involved with had to go to trial. I want to say it took 4 years to get from start to finish. And so, yeah, it can take a long time.
And in cases like that, when you have a child that's living with permanent injuries and disabilities and needs continuing care, I mean, how are the parents dealing with that while they're waiting to get to trial? I mean, they're having to front that cost, right?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, so there are different situations where maybe they have insurance or maybe they do have, care through other means. But, when we look at a case like that and we're trying to help this child, no child deserves to be in that situation,
sure.
Especially when it's at the hands of, another person's negligence. And that's our argument. We want that child to have the best life possible for that child and get the best care they can receive. And so while you're waiting for that to take place, the toll it takes on families, not just physically for the child, but emotionally, is just unbelievable. And I got to say, the families we represent are inspiring because they take it and they just focus on what they need to do to help their child. It's humbling and it's inspiring.
I'll say that all I do pretty much exclusively is medical malpractice. And, but with the birth injury cases that we have together, I think sitting in on the plaintiff's depositions, was it like a month ago in one of them, that is the first time I've cried during a deposition. I mean, it was eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because, well, probably a mixture of factors, right? A little hormonal at the moment, but also it's humbling. Yeah, she's our client sitting there talking about the loss of a child,
right? Because
someone else didn't do anything to intervene, right? And it's so moving. How do you balance the heaviness of these cases, right? Because in a lot of ways, I think, and free to disagree with me, that these are some of the heaviest medical malpractice cases just because of the facts at issue. But how do you balance that in your family life and your personal life, right? How do you not take that home all the time?
So, So I remember because my wife was pregnant through two pregnancies through while I was working in birth injury. And so I wasn't allowed to talk about a lot of the cases.
Sure.
Because, it was too heavy. So I think like the families that do inspire me because I've found when I talk to them, whether it be in a birth injury case or a death case, you're talking, and I always talk when I introduce myself, we talk about the case. I always have to remind myself and them, look, I know this is your life. I know you're going through something tragic.
Right.
I'm going to talk about it now in terms of the case and moving forward. But I think they have the capacity to understand this terrible thing happened, but I want to do something now about it, whether it be get care for my child or acknowledge the loss that, I've suffered and the life that was lost when my child has passed. And they're really good at helping me to stay focused on that. Like, okay, yes, this is a terrible thing to happen, but what can we do now? And you're never going to replace a lost child, for example.
Oh, of course not. Right.
But I do think there's something about just them wanting to have it recognized that this life was worth something and she's not here anymore. And, that's a worthy thing to be able to be part of. And so I just focus on that, I think.
And maybe give, while the litigation outlet or avenue, I guess, to justice takes quite a long time, there are clients, it sounds like, have found other outlets maybe that are more immediate to try and get that recognition, or I guess you can't really force anybody to take responsibility, but I'm trying to think of what that would look like.
Well, it's a hard thing because it is, we always say it's like if you lose a child, there's nothing you can really do to ever replace that. Nothing is going to, But there is something about just, when you go through a tragedy like that and the world just moves on, you just want everyone to stop and pause and say, hey, this child was lost and we need to recognize that. And I think there's, something about that at least gives you some kind of, I don't want to say peace because there's no peace, but some kind of at least acknowledgement that you've done something to mark that.
Right. And in some of these cases, I know, at least with the ones we deal with, there's failures of individual doctors or individual care providers. But have you also seen system-wide failures that have led to these types of cases?
Yes. And, this kind of goes along with, I don't want to get into too many specifics, but I've seen situations where policies don't match up with, or they're just disregarded. Sometimes we'll get things like, well, that's just a guideline, or, things aren't enforced, or things aren't taught or communicated. And I do think that as, we get into a more corporate kind of healthcare system, it's easier for those kinds of things to happen and things to fall through the cracks and, systemic problems to result in the tragedies we see.
Right. And when you were saying policies don't match, the thing that came to my mind were procedures, right? Just the way they operate.
Right.
And what are some of the ways through these types of cases that you handle that you can help your clients find accountability in those systemic type failures?
So, sometimes you can get situations where the thing I always tell them is this, is you're not maybe necessarily going to get what you want to get, which is everyone to acknowledge what they've done and change the rules necessarily.
Right.
But what I try to tell them is I do think litigation is one of the last, and it's sad that it takes us, but the legal process I think is one of the driving forces for healthcare reform and things like that. Because once that happens, I have seen situations where things do change. Now, maybe it's not publicly acknowledged, or it's not ever publicly acknowledged.
They don't want people to know, right?
Right, yeah. But we don't. We just want people to be safe. And so, that's a win. And so if, they might not get that specific immediate, this is why, but knowing, hey, listen, when this happens, they're going to take a look. I know they're going to do a review, see what happened and try to change it for next time. And that might not help you, but some people, most of my clients, I will say, have even said, I just don't want this to happen to someone else.
I see that as a popular theme with our clients too, that, I understand I can't undo what's happened to me.
Right.
I can only get justice for it, and the way that looks in our system is compensation. But if I can make a change, make a change. So we have not gotten to the usually lighthearted part of the podcast yet, but I ask every guest if there is someone or something out there that they want to give the bird to. So it's been all over the board. So I will open the floor to you. Who would you like to give the bird to?
I'd like to give the bird to big corporations that don't let you talk to a person when you have a problem.
Oh my God, that's frustrating.
I have so many situations where, I had to cancel something the other day, and it be a streaming service, whatever it is. If it's a big corporation, you're not talking to somebody. If you try to call, you can't get through. I tried to call you, I couldn't even find a number. I had to go through all chats. And if I hear one more automated voice telling me, press option 1 for this thing that doesn't apply to you. Press option 2. Sorry, you're having trouble. Goodbye.
Right. And you're like, I'm not having trouble. It's you.
Right. I just want to talk to a person. And I'm old. I remember times when you could call people and talk to them. So I guess that's a big thing for me. I had to give the bird to someone.
I like that one. I can relate to that one. How many times have you been sitting there on the phone and you're listening to the 15th automated message, right? You've gone through their whole phone tree and you still don't have a person. I've been that person that's just violently hitting 0. I'm like, I got to trip the system, right?
Exactly.
Can I do that? Well, sometimes you get a person and then sometimes it hangs up on you.
Yes.
And then there's an outburst of anger wherever I am in that moment.
That's right. And I feel bad for the person when you do get them because it's not their fault.
No.
Just by that time, you're...
Right.
Anyway. So.
That's one of the reasons, nobody likes calling airlines, but when you call Delta through whatever medallion line, a person answers. It's amazing.
Oh,
I'll just say that. I'll give a shout out to Delta because that's when I have to call them for a flight issue or whatever. at least they know enough to let you get to a person quickly, because that's so frustrating.
Right.
Wow, yeah, that might be one of the best Give 'em the Birds, because it is so relatable. I would be really interested to hear if there's anybody out there who doesn't agree with that.
Right. I think most people would say,
right.
No, I prefer the automated system.
So how, just kind of talking to folks out there who, may be navigating the waters of corporate healthcare or childcare or pregnant and about to have a baby, just kind of talking to those folks. Women go in to talk to their OBGYNs and talk about the birth process. A lot of times the doctors throw a whole bunch of risks at them, right? There's informed consent. And they're like, all these things can go wrong, right? You can bleed out and die and, right. Forget that you're even here. I don't know. There's just this long list of really terrible things. So what are any advice you have for people who are facing that, questions they should be asking, things that they should do through that process to help advocate for themselves, protect themselves?
Yeah, well, actually, you just said it. I was going to say, I know people say this all the time, but I do think you just have to advocate for yourself. You have to be an advocate for yourself, especially as a mom and as a woman, because I can't tell. We did a focus group one time, and one of the allegations was mom said, I was telling the doctor this and they weren't listening, and the men on the focus group were like, there's no way that's true, because doctors listen to you. When you say something, they listen. Women on the focus group were like, oh, that definitely happened. Right. And so I do think just be an advocate for yourself and ask questions. Usually moms, in a lot of our cases, moms know something was not right. And, if you've sensed that, ask questions. Or just if you see people running around in a way that seems strange, hey, what's all the hubbub? Why is everybody, or what does this mean? Or what does that mean? Or can you tell me how the baby's doing? Ask those questions, and don't be afraid to, be a pain, because you only get, one shot for this child. And so ask all the questions you have. Don't let anything sit. If you sense something, moms know, go ahead and say something.
Yeah, there's this thing that I've heard called mom gut. I think it's very much real.
Totally.
But that's great advice. Just speak up, advocate for yourself. And, I think there's overwhelmingly sometimes a fear to speak up when you're in the face of a doctor,
sure.
right? Yeah. They have superior knowledge. I'm not sure I have that fear because of what we do, right. But I recognize that it's there.
Yes.
So just encouraging people to overcome that. And
if you're afraid you're offending someone, you can apologize later when you have a safe baby.
Right.
And say, I'm sorry, I got a little work,
Right.
But say something.
I think everybody's going to understand that too,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So and this kind of goes along with talking about the risks, but how do you discern whether what happened to somebody, it was a preventable versus an unavoidable outcome? What are some of the things you're looking at?
Well, so from doing this for, as long as I have, there are some things I can look for. Like if I see things on the fetal monitor tracing that are ignored for a very long time, that's usually the biggest thing. And then I could say, I think something's wrong here. Now, I'm not a doctor. And so
sure.
I've thought, there's definitely negligence here, and then send it to an expert who says, I'm sorry, this is just an unavoidable, tragic thing that happened. Or sometimes you say, there might be, but you can't prove that. And those are those most difficult, But I think like you, I probably reject 90% of the
right.
people that come to me, and I have to tell them, I'm sorry, but this is just a tragedy and it's not anyone's fault. There are a lot of good doctors and nurses and people out there,
right.
And there are a lot of people out there who are good doctors and nurses who just do things that are negligent,
Make a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So those are tough conversations, but then sometimes I think, well, the one thing is at least you don't have to live with knowing that this was caused by somebody else. It was just a tragedy. That doesn't usually help in the moment because it's still a tragedy. But yeah, so that's the thing. So I think, I think especially delay, that usually seems to be the thing, avoiding dealing with a situation for too long and the baby suffering because of it. But those are the kinds of things I would look for, I think.
That makes sense. And what advice do you have for folks out there who are on the fence? They don't know if what has happened to them was preventable or unavoidable, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I would say call an attorney. Just have someone look at it.
Right.
Because it can't hurt. And if they can look at it first, the attorney can look at it. And, there are a lot of great attorneys here in Georgia. But we can look at it and decide whether we think it's worth sending off to an expert. And then you have the peace of mind of knowing, because I have had situations where people come to me and it's too late. And, they did have a case. And so I would say just don't. I understand you're dealing with the tragedy of the loss and all that. But as soon as you can, just contact someone and just have them take a look.
Right. It is time limited. So,
yes.
Yeah. I think the times vary depending on some different exceptions and circumstances, but generally within 2 years, right?
Yes.
Same thing for birth injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if anyone out there is concerned or thinks that, something might have happened that was preventable, follow Dan's advice. I think give us a call, give an attorney a call. Even if it's not us, of course, we're a little biased. So, and if you call Bird Law Group and it's birth injury case, you're going to get to Dan. So there's that. I've really enjoyed having you on today and talking about this very specialized area of medical malpractice.
I do, and I love working with you. And you're a great attorney, so I shout out to Bird. No.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad. Actually, Maggie introduced us, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very glad Maggie did.
We worked together years ago at Jones Day.
In your dark Big Law days.
That's right.
That's what I call them. Before you guys both saw the light.
We were in the Empire. Yes. Right.
I'm glad you both did because I think you're the plaintiff side's better for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're happy on the Rebel Alliance.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, all the social media things I'm supposed to tell you to do, and stay tuned for the next episode of Bird's Eye View.